Hey everyone, welcome back to my kitchen. I'm Bethany, and today's recipe is gonna be a little different. I'm gonna be having Drew, my husband, join us, and he's gonna be showing us how he makes his amazing country sourdough. In my Italian sausage soup video, I asked you guys if you would like to see his sourdough recipe, and I am so excited for him to share this recipe because the sourdough is truly one of the best that I've ever had, and that definitely says a lot because I feel like I've had a lot of good sourdoughs. So let's get right into it. Okay, so the first step in making a sourdough is we have to make our starter, right?
Yep, we do. So this is basically a pre-portioned, it's called leaven, for the bread. And this is what's going to help to rise the bread and ferment the bread.
So you don't have to use yeast.
Right, exactly. So this is the natural yeast. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with our starter. So this needs to be mature. If it's not mature, like it hasn't been going for at least 12 days or so, you're gonna have a struggle with baking. You're gonna underprove your bread. It's not gonna work out correctly. So make sure that is good to go. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take 80 grams of the mature starter. So I'm just gonna dump that into another jar. So we have 80 grams of the starter. And again, I'm using my scale to measure everything so we can be exact.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and tare my scale again so it kind of zeroes everything out. Now we're gonna add 120 grams of lukewarm water, and you want this between 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the next thing is flour. We're gonna be using a 50-50 blend of all-purpose flour and whole wheat flour. So we're gonna do 60 grams of each, and we should have equal amounts of water and flour for the starter. That's basically 100% hydration. All right, so after we add our flour, we're just going to mix this together very thoroughly, making sure that all that we put in there is incorporated together. I like using a jar scraper spatula for this because it just allows you to get into this jar a lot easier, clean up the sides, get it all mixed together thoroughly. Should look kind of like that. So this needs to sit aside for about 5 to 8 hours. You really want to do this the night before because if you're going to make the dough the next day, this has to be ready to go and it has to be more than doubled in size.
So because we are filming this, we already have a starter ready to go. So we're going to move on to the next step. Okay, so the next step in sourdough is we have to make our dough with our finished starter, right?
Right, that's right. So once your starter is appropriately risen for the dough. And like I said, when we were making our starter, you're going to leave that overnight and you want to put it in a warm area. A nice little tool that you actually gave me for Christmas is this sourdough, I guess, warmer.
It's called the Goldie.
The Goldie by Sour House. And what's great about that is it keeps it at the perfect temperature for that maximum like bacterial growth. Before I had this, the best way I kept a warm environment was to turn the oven on just for a brief amount of time, turn it off, and trap some of that air in there. We're gonna start with 650 grams of water. And again, we want lukewarm water. If you wanna go ahead and put that in, So again, 650 grams. So I'm gonna go ahead and tare our scale again, and we're gonna add 200 grams of our leaven to the water. The best way to check if this is ready to go is it should really float on the surface of the water, or at least float a little bit. And we're going to mix the leaven with the water. It doesn't need to be super thoroughly mixed, but I just found this helps to get the leaven just incorporated with the overall dough a lot better. Kind of gets it activated a little bit as well. After you mix the water and the leaven, you're gonna add 900 grams of bread flour. It's really important to use bread flour in this. I like using organic flours as well. And bread flour has a higher protein structure, and this is gonna help give the bread the right structure and texture. It's also gonna help it to retain its shape. So you really wanna use bread flour. You can use all-purpose flour.
Sorry, I forgot the number.
900.
Okay.
Okay, you're getting there.
I keep second guessing it.
Hey, you're good.
So we got 900 grams of bread flour.
Cool. And then we're gonna add 100 grams of whole wheat flour. So we're gonna do 25 grams of salt. So now we're gonna take the salt and just kind of dump this over everything. Some people like to mix the salt in after leaven in the dough had time to settle, but I just find that it works well just doing it all at the same time. All right, now we're seeing something. It should start to look kind of like a shaggy dough, at least right now. So I'm just gonna use my hands now to get the rest of that loose flour at the bottom of the bowl and pull that together here with the rest of the dough. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna spray this with a little bit of a neutral oil. In our case, we have avocado oil. So just spray the inside of your container. So if you're using a bowl, just do that as well. If you don't have avocado oil, you can just use a little bit of olive oil or something like that. That's totally fine. So I'm just gonna get this out of the bowl and just plop it right into that bowl. Now we're gonna cover this up. I'm gonna put it in a warm environment for about 40 minutes. So our dough has been sitting for about 40 minutes in a warm environment. And so what we're gonna do is perform a stretch and fold on this dough. And this is gonna be a little bit different than maybe you see on some other recipes. We're gonna simplify this as much as possible. Take the dough out of the container, and we're just gonna put this onto our countertop. It does help at this point to have a little bit of water on your hands, and this will really help to reduce any sticking on this dough. So what we're gonna do is take the dough and we're going to basically stretch the dough out as far as possible. So you basically just kind of lift it up and stretch it out as if you were stretching out a pizza dough. It's a little bit different than other stretch and folds you may, again, see on other recipes. It basically starts building that gluten structure within the bread, but also disperses our leaven or our yeast, in a sense, even better. So once you stretch this out, you're going to then take one side and just fold it up on itself a couple times. And basically, by stretching everything out, you're able to then get the sourdough, our starter, more integrated within the dough itself. Because at this point, our dough is kind of, it's tearing in some places and it's not fully formed yet, and that's okay. So once you kind of get it rolled up into sort of a log, I just sort of roll it up from the bottom until the top, and then I'll take it and just kind of work it into a little bit of a ball here, just so it's come together. You may feel a little bit of air in your dough, and that's okay at this point. Then we're gonna take our dough and just lift it up off the counter, put it right back into the container that we were using before. Just press it down a little bit there. Grab our lid. All right, we will cover our container with the lid, or if you're using a bowl, plastic wrap. And our total proof time for this dough is 6 hours. So from here, we already let this sit for about 40 minutes. We're gonna let this sit in our proving situation, our warm environment, for another 5 hours and 15 minutes.
Okay, so we already have a dough already ready to go for our pre-shaping. Let me get this lid off.
Good job.
We kind of had to pre-plan everything so that otherwise we'd be filming for like 2 days with this.
Yeah, if we were following through the exact timings, we would be here at night filming, so we didn't want to do that. You can see that this has risen quite a bit. You want it to be about doubled or so. And so we're gonna just get it out onto the countertop.
And there's nothing on the countertop.
Nothing on the countertop.
Okay.
At this point. So you don't need to put down any flour. You can see how nice and easy this comes out of the bowl or out of the container. That's a sign that this is really, it's proved correctly.
How can you tell if it's overproved or underproved?
Underproved, it's really not going to feel very aerated. If you want to touch that dough, like you can kind of feel Like it has some aeration to it. It's kind of nice and light. And it's also not like ultra sticky. We want to respect the aeration. We don't want to knock too much of that air out of the dough. So we're going to take our bench scraper, and since we're making 2 loaves, we're going to kind of eyeball and cut this into two pieces. So I'm just going to eyeball the middle here. It's okay if they're not exactly perfect, but you basically just want to cut down the middle and just separate this into 2 pieces. In my experience, there's usually one loaf that's a little bit larger than the other, and that's okay. We're not gonna work the dough a ton. You're gonna take your hands and you're gonna use a cupping motion, and you're just gonna start bringing the dough onto itself, basically. Just back onto itself into a cupping motion. And you just kind of spin it around, push it back.
And there's a reason that you didn't want any flour on the countertop, right? You just want it to just kind of, the countertop almost helps give like friction a little bit.
That's right. So if you put a lot of flour down, what happens is, the countertop can't actually create friction. You want friction so that the surface tension can start building up around the edge of the loaf.
Okay.
So that's good. We don't need to touch that one anymore. And you can also use your bench scraper and just start pushing it around a little bit, tucking everything underneath. Keep spinning it, cupping it, pushing it back.
Okay.
Cool. So that's good. This is not a final shape. We're gonna let these sit on the countertop for about 30 minutes.
Okay.
And we're gonna cover them so that the outside edges the outside does not dry out too much. Best way to cover them is really just to take your container and just put it over top. I also have another bowl here, another glass bowl, so you can do kind of the same thing and just put that glass bowl. So these will sit for 30 minutes, and then we're gonna come back and do our final shaping before our final proof.
Okay. So now we're on to our final shaping process, right?
Yes, that's right. So these have been sitting for 30 minutes on the countertop in their pre-shaped form, and we're going to do our final shaping. All right, and at this point you want your bannetons or your proving basket ready to go. I have 2 of them. They're round shape, and if you don't have these, you can use a regular bowl, but I find these are much more helpful to use in this particular step. All right, so what we're gonna do first is I'm gonna take just a little bit of regular all-purpose flour, or we're gonna dust the top of our pre-shaped loaves. And after dusting with a little bit of flour, you're gonna come under the dough, and you're gonna flip it over on its back. So then now the top is on the bottom. And we're going to stretch this dough out just a little bit at the top and the bottom. But this is basically gonna give us the ability to start bringing the dough back onto itself and shaping it. We're gonna pull out just a little bit, and we're gonna bring that to the middle, a little over the middle of the dough, like that.
Okay.
See that?
Mm-hmm.
Then we're gonna do the other side. Bring it out, come back over top of the other fold that we just created. And then we're gonna take the top, pull that out just a little bit, and we're gonna bring that over to basically the base of that other fold of the 2 sides. And then the bottom, again, we stretch this out and pull that up over the one that we did from the top. And then we basically just roll the whole thing over onto itself. Now the sides are not properly covered. Usually what I do here is I just kind of bring some extra dough around and tuck it underneath at this point, and then I'll do the same thing on the other side, just kind of tuck the dough down underneath a little bit. The idea is we want all of that to kind of tuck underneath of our dough. And then we're gonna cup our hands and do basically what we did with the pre-shaping, and we're gonna just pull that dough towards ourselves and keep spinning it around, tucking it underneath of itself until we get a nice round ball shape, basically, with some height to it. Next, we want to grab our banneton. We want to have this at the ready. We also want to get a little bit of rice flour. This is really helpful in dusting the loaf so that it will separate from the banneton when we're ready to bake. And I'm using a sieve because I just want to basically dust the top of the loaf. And then I'm going to take my banneton and I'm just going to dust the inside edges of this with the rice flour as well, a little bit on the bottom. And then what we're gonna do is we're going to take our bench scraper, going to come underneath of our loaf, and just while holding this and moving this over at the same time, you're just gonna
flip it over.
Flip it over into the banneton. You can kind of spin it with your hands a little bit to get it centered. And what I like to do, again, is just kind of give a little bit of extra rice flour around the edge, just for extra measure. This is going to expand inside the banneton, so you want to protect the edges. Make sure that there's no sticking going on. So I'm gonna set this aside, and we're gonna do the other loaf. All right, next we're gonna put the shape dough in a warm area for the final proof for about an hour and a half. I like to cover mine with a large cutting board, and this keeps the dough from drying out. 30 minutes before you bake, set your oven to 450 and put your Dutch oven inside to preheat. All right, so what we're gonna do is take our first loaf, and we're gonna flip the parchment and the cutting board over top of our banneton. We're gonna grab the whole thing together, and we're gonna flip over gently so that the loaf is hopefully going to come out on the other side.
Beautiful.
Perfect. Just so that the parchment doesn't completely go crazy inside of the pot, I'm going to cut some of this extra off on the sides. So this would just be like the top and the bottom. So we're gonna make a couple scores on the bread, and this is gonna help to expand in the oven properly. So just a little bit away from the center, I'm going to press in on the bread. You wanna get about a 1/4 inch depth cut in your scores.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna just come to the other side, basically just like
Overlap.
perpendicular, overlap it a little bit, push in and score down this side. Create another line here. Spin it one more time and score it one more time this direction. Okay, then what I like to do is actually just put a little crisscross in the middle. That's a common thing you see on like artisanal sourdough.
Okay. And I did want to mention the pot that we're using is actually really special to me. You don't see it in any of my videos because I typically need a bigger pot. But this is my Aunt Valerie's cast iron pot, and she passed away about 6 years ago. And I really wanted one thing to have in my kitchen from her. And my Uncle Joe, I have two Uncle Joes, my Uncle Joe and Goglia, gave me this pot, and it just means so much. So I love that we bake our bread in it. If you read my bios anywhere, I always mention my aunts and how they had such an influence on my cooking, and my Aunt Valerie was one of them. So, yeah.
That's great. All right, so before we add the dough into the pot, I like to sprinkle a little bit of flour on the bottom, and I found this really helps to reduce the charring on the bottom of the bread as it bakes.
So how long will we bake this in the oven?
So 25 minutes covered, so we can get that steam inside, and then we're gonna take the lid off and bake it for another 20 minutes, and that will really build that outside crust.
Nice, okay. All right, so we actually filmed a whole tasting of everything, and then our main camera wasn't filming because somebody has to run the cameras while Drew's baking the bread, and I guess I missed the main one. So
Unfortunately, you're fired.
yeah, so I'll not see you guys next week, but we have to film that again. So, thankfully we have another loaf.
We have another loaf, and this just came out of the oven about, what, 20, 30 minutes ago?
Yeah, like 30
so
minutes
it's perfect. You would generally want to wait about 20 minutes or so. Some people say an hour before you break into the bread. You can see that we already cut this other one because we did a tasting already, but now we're gonna do another tasting. So
For practice.
you can never have too much bread.
No.
Bethany loves the end piece.
Yes, I already have mine over there.
So she's already got hers. She goes for the end piece right away.
Yep, I love the crust. If I could just have all the crust.
Here's how that crumb looks. I can see some larger air pockets on this one, but that's okay. Sometimes there's gonna be irregularities in the crumb, but you want some evenness throughout.
Yeah, I mean, we've already had this, but I don't mind more.
All right, let's dig in.
It's nice and chewy, and I think that's like a main characteristic of sourdough, is it just has like, not really a toughness, but it does, but a chewiness and a really nice crust. That's why I love the end piece. It's just nice and crusty, but really nice and soft in the center. And it just has such great flavor. Sourdough just has, especially like as it ferments, I don't really know all the terminology, but I think
Yeah,
it's just everything, yeah, like the flavor has just really developed. And I love the whole wheat bite in it.
This is 10% whole wheat flour in this recipe, so I love having that in there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what makes it a country artisan sourdough bread. So, man, this is the best bread. Honestly, it still just blows my mind that you can make bread this good at home. And my goal with this recipe was really to take a really complex, something that can be very complex, simplify it as much as possible. And yeah, maybe this won't beat like Tartine's sourdough bread,
Yeah.
but this is an amazing bread to make at home.
Yeah.
It really is. And if you follow the steps, you stay patient with the timings,
Yeah.
and you stay focused on the temperature, you can get an amazing result. And
I know.
honestly, you will blow people away with this bread.
Seriously, like I would buy this. That's how good it is. And
Yep.
if I had a bakery near me that sold this, I'd be like, yes, this is delicious.
Yep.
But anyway, if you guys try this recipe, we would love to know what you think and how you like it. Drew will be in the comments, so if you guys have any questions, he'll be around. I'll also be around, but he'll be the main one answering anything. And yeah, if you guys try this, we would love to know what you think. And you can also let us know on our website too. And as always, we'll catch you in the next recipe, and I'll see you in the comments. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.